Welcome to this explainer. We're going to take the massive, sprawling history of human civilization and compress it into the core thematic cycles that literally built the modern world around us. We'll track how humanity evolved from basic survival to incredibly complex societies, and follow the rapid rise and fall of empires, philosophies, and global connections. Let's dive in.
So, how exactly did we go from microscopic particles floating in a petri dish to ruling the globe? Well, it's a wild story. It's full of sheer ingenuity, brutal conquests, and our absolute, relentless human obsession with finding some kind of order in a totally chaotic universe. Okay, let's start our chronological sprint millions of years ago. I mean, from floating atoms to the very first hominids stepping out of the brush 6 million years ago, our biological evolution was incredibly rapid. Homo erectus marched out of Africa with larger brains, and Neanderthals adapted to the freezing environments of Europe. But ultimately, it was Homo sapiens who essentially hacked the system to build civilization as we know it today.
Just imagine going from endlessly chasing your dinner every single day to, simply planting it in your backyard. That monumental shift happened in Mesopotamia. By inventing agriculture, humans stopped constantly wandering. We created tools to crush grain, engineered our own food supply, and practically overnight, cities like Uruk exploded to 50,000 residents.
But here's the crazy part. There was a huge hidden physical cost to this agricultural revolution. We essentially traded our athletic hunter-gatherer physiques for much smaller farming frames. Men literally shrank from an average of 5'9" to 5'3", and women down to 5 feet. We became physically smaller, bound to the soil. But it was the exact trade-off needed for our populations to absolutely boom. Now, with populations absolutely booming, ancient rulers like Babylon's King Hammurabi had to create strict legal systems to keep everything from falling apart. You've probably heard the famous eye for an eye catchphrase, right? Well, don't let that fool you into thinking things were equal. Under Hammurabi's 282 laws, which were etched in stone, human value was entirely based on social caste. A noble's bone was legally worth more than a peasant's, which was worth more than a slave's.
And you can see this rigid inequality perfectly mapped out in ancient Egypt. It was literally a human pyramid. Down at the wide base, peasants did the backbreaking manual labor. In the middle, scribes, artisans, and soldiers kept the daily wheels turning. And the whole shebang existed for one reason: to prop up a single person at the very peak. The pharaoh, who was viewed as the supreme mediator between the gods and men, ensuring eternal rule in the afterlife.
Meanwhile, over in early Chinese dynasties, they introduced this idea called the Mandate of Heaven. It basically established that absolute power was a divine right, but only if you actually deserved it. Starting with legends like Yu the Great taming the Yellow River floods, the precedent was set. If you ruled with merit, you kept the power. But if the heavens sent a drought or an earthquake, your time was up, your blessing was revoked, and a new dynasty would violently take over. As these civilizations expanded, we start to see entirely contrasting ideologies clashing. Greece is a perfect example of this. On one hand, you've got Sparta, brutal militarism, hyper-focused on physical strength, relying entirely on an enslaved class. On the other hand, Athens was an absolute mess of civic engagement. 30,000 citizens would directly shout out votes. They even used a bizarre tube and ball machine called the chloroterigon to randomly pick council members, just to stop people from bribing each other.
Now, all that democratic shouting, it seriously frustrated thinkers like Plato. He advocated for what he called a philosopher king. To him, leaving the navigation of the state to a randomly selected citizen was just barbaric. He believed only someone who had dedicated their entire life to understanding logic, wisdom, and justice was actually fit to control the ship of humanity. Shifting over to the east, entirely different philosophical anchors were being forged for the everyday peasant. Because, let's face it, when your whole life consists of farming for a king, you really need a way to find some kind of peace. Confucianism offered formal social conventions and strict rituals to maintain order and respect. Taoism, though, went the other way. It taught individuals to align with the natural flow of the universe, balance opposing forces like yin and yang, and basically stop worrying about things totally outside their control. Over in India, a similar search for ultimate meaning led Prince Siddhartha Gautama to completely abandon his perfect sheltered palace life. Stepping outside and witnessing sickness and death for the first time completely shattered his utopian illusion. It sparked this profound quest that transformed him into the Buddha, the awakened one. He achieved enlightenment under a fig tree, spreading a message of inner peace that transcended the limitations of the ego.
So, with basic survival, order, and meaning finally established, humanity shifted gears into a relentless cycle of imperial expansion. Suddenly, ambitious leaders from the Mediterranean to Asia all believed they were the philosopher kings meant to conquer the globe.
This kicked off a rapid, bloody cycle of conquest and collapse. Just look at the domino effect here. Aristotle teaches Alexander the Great, who then marches his armies all the way to India before dying at just 32. Centuries later, Julius Caesar uses brilliant siege tactics to conquer Gaul, only to be assassinated, which, ironically, paved the exact path for his heir, Augustus, to crown himself Rome's first true emperor.
And then, in just a massive twist of historical irony, a child born in a stable during a routine Roman tax census ended up sparking a movement that eventually overtook the mighty Roman Empire itself. Because of Augustus's census, Mary and Joseph traveled to Bethlehem. The teachings of Jesus challenged the established order, leading to his crucifixion. But the message spread like wildfire globally, eventually leading Roman emperors themselves to embrace Christianity and officially codify its beliefs.
Now, while the Western Roman Empire was falling into a dark age of invasions, the East was experiencing an absolute explosion of innovation. In India, Gupta mathematicians were literally inventing the concept of zero and calculating the Earth's circumference. In the Middle East, the Abbasid Caliphate built the incredible House of Wisdom in Baghdad, pioneering algebra. And in China, the Tang dynasty fostered this amazing peaceful coexistence of religions alongside the absolute height of Chinese poetry.
But, as history shows us, imperial ambition is really hard to kill. Enter Genghis Khan. From a childhood of abandonment, he violently united nomadic tribes into an unstoppable cavalry force. His warfare was terrifyingly brutal, razing cities to the ground across Asia. He conquered so much territory that a staggering 8% of South Asian men today carry his DNA. It's a literal biological footprint of absolute conquest.
As we hurtled toward the modern era, the world map was rapidly shrinking. Trade routes connected continents, leading to unprecedented wealth, brutal new conquerors, and entirely new global challenges that would permanently reshape human civilization. Those bustling trade routes of the Silk Road, they didn't just carry spices and silk, they carried the bubonic plague. It wiped out an estimated 75 to 200 million people. It was a horrific dark age. But it actually came with a wild side effect. With the labor force so severely decimated, the surviving peasants and farmers suddenly had massive leverage. For the first time, they could actually demand better rights and keep more of what they produced.
Despite the plague, wealth and knowledge were exploding globally. Take Mansa Musa in Mali. He was so unimaginably wealthy that he actually crashed local economies and caused inflation just by handing out gold on his commute to Mecca. Over in the Americas, the Aztecs were engineering brilliant canal cities. But this era of localized prosperity violently collided with European expansion in 1492, as Spanish conquistadors used superior weaponry and biohazards like smallpox to conquer the Americas.
Right around the cultural height of the European Renaissance, while Michelangelo was painting masterpieces, Niccolò Machiavelli penned a much darker truth about human nature. He pointed out that ordinary people endured tyranny and heavy taxes simply because they were terrified of what would happen without ruthless leaders protecting them. Fear, he argued, was the ultimate glue of society.
Yet, despite all that, humanity consistently pushed back against that fear. The dominoes began to fall faster and faster now. English barons forced the king to sign the Magna Carta. Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to a door, sparking a massive religious reformation. The Peace of Westphalia laid the groundwork for modern sovereign states. And it all culminated in American patriots signing a declaration asserting that all men have an unalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Which brings us to today. Watching this endless cycle of survival, order, and revolution leaves us with one incredibly provocative question. Where exactly does our modern society sit within this historical loop right now? We've gone from the very first farmers of Uruk to globally interconnected empires, constantly balancing the need for order with the deep human desire for freedom. Take a look at the systems, the leaders, and the social structures we rely on today. Are we at the beginning of a brand new era or the end of our current cycle?